About as good as this will get. This needs to extract another 50 millimeters.
Mold join. I mean, these are all things that you don't see. You know, what consumers end up seeing are kind of perfect objects. But long before the perfect object arrives to the market, there's, you know, many prototypes. And there have been many production issues to resolve in order to get it to that point.
These things are certainly on their way to market. Here at the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, they make one truck every minute. But if you're always designing things for the production line, it can create mental monotony, and that's not good.
Sometimes you need some sort of meteor to come in from outer space and just blow things up so that you look at it very differently.
Jay Mays was a fan of Newson's design work, and in the late 90s, he invited him to create a concept car. Not for production, but for inspiration. It wasn't easy.
I will never forget coming into the studio and really high in anticipation of what I was going to see. And I said, all right, you know, we'd had a coffee, let's have a look. And so he pulled out this tiny sketch pad, and on this really tiny sketch pad was a really tiny drawing. And I had a complete oh shit moment, because the drawing could not have been more than 4 millimeters large. And I was like, all right, this looks pretty great, you know. And so I was telling myself, this is fantastic, knowing that I had to go back to Detroit and convince 24 vice presidents in a company with 350,000 employees that this was a good idea.
A lot more drawings and a lot of work later, Marc completed his first really big corporate job. This is the 021C, as modelled by its creator.
I'd like to have one of these, Mark.
So would I.
Yes.
Alan.
That is incredibly beautiful. What made you shape the car like this in the front and in the back?
If you ask a little kid to draw a car, they'll design something, you know, typical, you know, what they refer to as sort of a 3-box construction, which is, you know, the front, the back, and the bit on top, and 2 wheels. And I thought that would be a really interesting way of approaching this, because everyone, you know, that's a recognizable form for everybody. Where I was able to really differentiate this project was in the details. It's all in the details.
So, what are the details? Well, just look at the doors. The seats swing right out. The boot opens like a kitchen drawer. Even the tyres are custom made. And inside, it's just as pleasing.
I mean, most cars are cluttered with stuff. In fact, the more status the car has in some areas, you know, the more stuff there is out there for you to play with. You've gone the other way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, my objective was not to try to produce something that mystifies people, but to try to produce something that is simple for people to understand. That you've got to be able to get into this car and with one look understand how to operate it. You know, I don't want people to have to read, you know, I hate reading instruction manuals. I throw them away immediately. It just, you know, they bore me. And so that was a big challenge, to try just to reduce the number of controls to an absolute minimum.
Normally, surely in a car, there are different people design different parts of the car.
That's a very interesting point, and that's one of the reasons why cars, to my liking, look incredibly incoherent.
They actually let you design every aspect of the car?
They did. I think it came as a bit of a shock, and it was certainly not the usual way that any automotive company works. But for me, it was crucially important, because, you know, I wanted this car to speak my language.
So this is a protest car, is it?
It is, yes. The fact is, this is just a vehicle for me to try and sort of exercise some of my demons, and to solve all of the niggling little things that have irritated me over all of the years when I've owned cars.
Marc Newson loves automobiles, but his favourite place to actually do his design work is away from all distractions, on an aeroplane. He thinks and thinks and thinks, visualizing his design, and then he starts to sketch. But with the vast range of work he tackles, how does he juggle all those ideas?
You do have a sort of breadth of interest in the range of things and products, don't you? A lot, you know, from aeroplanes to coat hangers. Those are the things that you... I mean, that must be a lot to carry in your head.
It is and it isn't. You know, for me, it's design. You know, that's what design is. It's the same métier. You know, it's the same skill that you apply to all of these things. The materials change, the scale changes. But beyond that, really, I solve the problem as it arises or as it's presented to me. You know, people always say, how can you comfortably sort of, design a watch and, design the interior of an airplane or, design a car at the same time? And my answer is that, I would sort of hazard to suggest that if you can't do that as a designer, then, perhaps you're not a good designer.
This designer's imagination, then, knows no bounds. Look, he even does interiors. Here in New York, the restaurant he created. Here, the boutique he designed. And here, his Paris crash pad with a view to die for.
It's really great for me to have a few things around that just are not about now. This is one of the very early prototypes that I made for myself. This thing's just kind of followed me around the world. It's just like a sort of bad smell, really. I can't seem to get rid of it.
The kitchen, metal and marble, is very boys' toys.
Everything's kind of built like a toolbox. That was my inspiration, was a big kind of snap-on tool case. It's called the felt chair. This one, as you can see, has been completely mangled by my cat.
And what about this table?
The more interesting part of this table is underneath.
It's a solid piece of wood which has had a hexagonal triangulated grid milled out of it,
which the company making it thought I was completely bonkers.
But in a house full of design, what is it that excites Marc most? Well, apparently these 7 Samurai limited edition dolls.
These are really hard to get, these dolls. They only made they only made a few of them. I don't know how many sets, but I just thought it's hysterical. They all come with like 3 different outfits, and they have swords. This guy has a sword, but he's not. Yeah, I mean the problem is, I had them all like perfectly placed, but my cat likes to go there and kind of knocks them off one by one. So, they all have to kind of like sit back, and, so as they don't get knocked off.
Soaring above Park Avenue in New York is Lever House, a modernist tower built in the 1950s. It's one of the city's landmark buildings. Inside, Lever House Restaurant, created by Marc Newson in 2003. It's a windowless bunker of wood and Japanese plaster. This stuff's made from grass and hay and adored by Newson for its natural look. He had gallons specially shipped in, as you do. He even changed the habit of a lifetime and used carpet. Marc chose these materials because he wanted to create warmth, but he knew there had to be drama too, because this is a serious power restaurant.
People come here, not people like me, but politicians and sort of important suity type people.
But before the suits can start spending, you've got to construct your interior, and Marc doesn't really like that bit.
The process of construction for me is an absolute and utter nightmare. Most of the time I get things right because we do it a few times. We make a number of prototypes and we iron out all the problems. This is just, you know, this is one space. You know, if I did it again, it'd be a lot better. But you know, trouble is, you only ever get to do it once.